Welcome back to our future AI podcast, Paper Review. Today, we're diving into some serious AI controversy with this report called Chinese Critiques of Large Language Models. You know, all the hype around ChatGPT and how it's going to lead us to the AI promised land.
Yeah.
Well, some top Chinese scientists are saying, hold on a second, not so fast.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see this kind of alternative perspective emerge. In the West, we've got figures like Jeffrey Hinton and Ilya Sutskever basically saying, just keep scaling up these large language models,
Yeah.
LLMs, and bam, we'll have general AI that can just do it all.
Right.
But this report highlights kind of a wave of skepticism coming from China, questioning if that's really the right path at all.
Okay, so what's making them so skeptical? I mean, these LMs are getting pretty impressive.
Sure, they can write poems and code and even hold conversations that feel, eerily human. But the report points out some pretty glaring limitations even as these models get more and more complex. For example, one study cited found that with a certain type of LLM incorrect or hallucinated, answers actually increased from 15.5% to 21% when the model size jumped from 137 billion to 1.5 trillion parameters.
Wait, so bigger isn't always better? That seems
Mhm.
kind of counterintuitive.
Right. And it gets worse. Remember all that excitement about emergent behaviors in LLMs? Like suddenly the model develops this unexpected new ability just by scaling it up.
Yeah.
Well, some research is now suggesting that those emergent behaviors might not be as significant as we initially thought.
So they're saying that those emergent abilities are just a fluke and not a sign of true intelligence.
That's what some of these Chinese scientists are arguing, and they're not just any random folks. We're talking about some pretty heavy hitters in the Chinese AI scene. People like Tang Ji from Tsinghua University. He's kind of a leading voice in AI research over there.
Okay, so what's Tangji's beef with LLMs? What does he think is the missing piece of the puzzle?
Well, he argues that to truly understand the world and achieve human-level intelligence, AI needs to be embodied in the world. He draws inspiration from biology, emphasizing that living organisms learn through interacting and getting feedback from their environment.
So basically he's saying you can't just feed an AI a bunch of data and expect it to magically become intelligent. Like
Yeah.
it needs to experience the world firsthand through robots or something.
Exactly. And that's a pretty stark contrast to the prevailing approach in the West, which is, heavily focused on just feeding LLMs more and more data.
That's interesting. So we've got one Chinese scientist saying LLMs need a physical body to truly learn. Who else is featured in this report?
Well, there's Zhang Yaqian, the former president of Baidu, who has also expressed concerns about the limitations of LLMs. But the most scathing critique comes from Zhu Sumchen, the director of the Beijing Institute for General Artificial Intelligence.
Oh,
He doesn't mince words. He calls LLMs inherently uninterpretable and lacking in crucial reasoning abilities.
inherently uninterpretable. So even the people creating these LLMs don't fully understand how they work. That seems a little unsettling, to be honest.
It is, and he goes even further, saying that they lack the causal and mathematical reasoning capabilities needed to achieve true general intelligence.
Okay, so he's not just saying that LLMs have limitations. He's saying they're fundamentally flawed.
His analogy is pretty striking. He compares current LLM achievements to climbing Mount Everest when the real goal is to reach the moon.
Wow.
He believes that relying solely on LLMs to reach general AI is like, focusing on the wrong peak entirely.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. So if Zhu Songshen is so down on LLMs, what does he think is the right path to general AI? Is China just giving up on LLMs altogether?
Not exactly. They're still developing LLMs, but what's interesting is that they're also investing heavily in alternative approaches, particularly what they call brain-inspired AI.
Brain-inspired AI. What does that even mean? Is that like building a computer that thinks exactly like a human brain?
Well, not exactly. Think of it this way. Instead of just trying to mimic the behavior of the human brain, they're looking at the structure and the function of the brain for inspiration.
Okay.
So, they're developing new AI architectures based on how real neurons communicate and process information.
So instead of throwing more data at the problem, they're trying to build AI that works more like our own brains.
Precisely. And this isn't just some fringe idea. China's government is actively encouraging this kind of research. In fact, the Haitian district government has a 3-year plan that includes funding for research into brain-like functionalities for humanoid robots.
Humanoid robots. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But it goes back to Tang Ji's point about AI needing to be embodied to truly learn and understand the world.
Okay, so we've got these critiques of LLMs in China investing in these brain-inspired AIs and robots. Where does this leave us? Is this a sign that China is about to overtake the West in the AI race?
It's definitely a sign that the global AI landscape is shifting. China isn't putting all its eggs in the LLM basket like many in the West are doing. They're hedging their bets and exploring multiple paths to general AI simultaneously.
So it's not just about who gets to general AI first, but also about what kind of AI we end up with.
Exactly. It's like we're at a fork in the road, and the path we choose now could have huge implications for the future.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking. We've covered a lot of ground already, but I'm eager to dig deeper into these alternative paths to general AI that China is exploring.
Absolutely. After we take a quick moment to gather our thoughts, we'll come back and unpack some of these alternative approaches in more detail. We'll also discuss what this all means for you, our listeners, and the future of AI development globally.
All right, just dove deep into some serious critiques of LLMs coming from China. They're not convinced that scaling up these massive language models is the only or even the best way to achieve general AI. But if they're not all in on LLMs, what are they focusing on instead?
Well, one of the alternative paths they're exploring is something called embodied intelligence. Remember how Tang Ji argued that AI needs to experience the world like a living organism to truly understand it?
Right.
Embodied intelligence is all about that, putting AI into physical bodies so it can interact with the real world directly.
So we're talking robots then, like
Yeah.
AI driving cars or controlling robot arms in factories.
Exactly. The idea is that by interacting with the physical world, AI can develop a deeper understanding of concepts like space, time, and causality. Think about it. A child learns about gravity not by reading about it in a book, but by, dropping toys and watching them fall. Embodied intelligence aims to give AI that same kind of hands-on learning experience.
That makes sense. But humanoid robots, that seems like a pretty big leap. I mean,
Mm.
is there a reason they're focusing on human-like forms rather than, say, just robot arms or something simpler?
It's a good question. The report doesn't go into specifics, but it's likely that they see the human form as a particularly versatile and adaptable platform for embodied AI. I mean, humans have evolved to interact with a wide range of environments and objects, so replicating that form could give AI a similar level of flexibility.
Interesting. So they're not just trying to create AI that can think like humans, they're also trying to create AI that can move and interact with the world like humans. But what about safety? Letting robots learn by trial and error in the real world seems like it could be a bit risky, right?
That's a valid concern, and that's where another key aspect of China's AI strategy comes in, this idea of value-driven AI.
Okay, remind me again what that means. Is it just about putting limits on what AI can do? Like setting up guardrails to prevent it from doing harm?
It's more than just guardrails. It's about building AI systems that are fundamentally aligned with human values from the ground up. Zhu Songchen, who you might remember was quite critical of LLMs, is a major advocate for this approach. He argues that true AI safety and reliability depend on ensuring that AI's goals and motivations are in sync with our own.
I can see how that would be important,
Hmm.
especially if we're talking about AI controlling robots that are interacting with the real world. But how do you actually program values into an AI? That seems incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
It's certainly a challenging task. The report mentions that Zhu has outlined 5 key dimensions of value that he believes are essential for AI. These range from basic self-value, like the drive for self-preservation, to more complex social values that govern interactions with others.
5 dimensions of value. Could you give me an example of what that might look like in practice? Like how would those values actually be implemented in an AI system?
Well, imagine a robot designed to assist in a healthcare setting. One of the social values it might be programmed with is a strong emphasis on empathy and compassion. So rather than just efficiently completing tasks, it would be designed to understand and respond to the emotional needs of the patients it's interacting with.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about programming the robot to avoid causing physical harm.
Mhm.
It's also about programming it to understand and respond to human emotions and values.
Exactly. And that's a pretty stark contrast to the way many Western AI systems are currently being developed, where the focus is often on efficiency and task completion above all else.
This is making me think about how this could play out in different areas of society. Imagine value-driven AI being used in education or in government, or even in the development of new technologies. It could potentially lead to some really profound changes.
Absolutely. It's a completely different way of thinking about AI development, and it could have far-reaching implications for how we interact with technology and with each other.
This is all incredibly exciting, but also a little daunting. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what this all means for the future of AI, both in China and globally.
That's a great segue into our final section. After a brief pause, we'll come back and discuss what these trends in Chinese AI research could mean for you, our listeners, and what to watch for as this fascinating story continues to unfold.
Okay, so we've explored how Chinese scientists are pushing back against this, bigger is better narrative surrounding LLMs and exploring some really intriguing alternative paths to general AI.
Paths that prioritize real-world interaction and embedding human values into AI systems from the very beginning.
It's a fascinating shift in perspective. I have to admit, it's made me kind of question some assumptions that I had about the future of AI.
That's exactly what we hope to achieve with these deep dives. Challenge conventional thinking and expose you to new ideas and possibilities.
But let's get down to, brass tacks here.
Hmm.
Why should our listeners care about what's happening with AI research in China? How does this impact them, directly?
It's tempting to think of AI development as something happening in, labs far removed from our daily lives. But the reality is that AI is already having a pretty profound impact on the world all around us, and those impacts are only going to grow in the coming years.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're already seeing AI being used in everything from healthcare to finance to transportation. And the decisions being made about how AI is developed and deployed will have huge implications for, all of us.
Absolutely. And this report highlights a potential divergence in those decisions, with the West largely focused on scaling up LLMs while China explores these, alternative approaches. This could lead to a future where we have different types of AI systems with different strengths and weaknesses, developed under different ethical frameworks, and potentially even with different goals.
So it's not just about who gets the general AI first, but also about what kind of AI we end up with and how that AI shapes our world.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be aware of these different perspectives and approaches. The report even suggests that the U.S. government should support research into alternative GAI approaches, partly to, keep pace with China's advancements.
So competition can actually drive innovation and lead to a more diverse and robust AI ecosystem in the long run.
That's the idea. And it's not just about competition. There's also the potential for collaboration and knowledge sharing. After all, we all share the same planet, and we all have a stake in ensuring that AI is developed in a way that benefits humanity as a whole.
This has been an eye-opening deep dive, to say the least. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this, complex and rapidly evolving field.
We certainly have, but hopefully this deep dive has equipped you with some valuable insights and perspectives to navigate this, ever-changing world of AI.
Before we sign off, there's one question that's been swirling in my mind ever since we started talking about value-driven AI.
I'm all ears.
If we could somehow program human values into an AI system, would it truly understand those values? Or are values inherently subjective and tied to our human experience in a way that a machine could never fully grasp?
That's a profound question, and honestly one that I don't think anyone has a definitive answer to yet. It gets to the heart of what it means to be human, to have consciousness, and to experience the world in all its complexity. And it's a question that we'll likely continue to grapple with as AI becomes more sophisticated and integrated into our lives.
On that note, we'll leave you to ponder that question along with all the other, thought-provoking ideas we've explored in this deep dive.
Right.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Chinese AI critiques and alternative paths to general AI. Until next time, stay curious.